Good evening, everyone. I humbly acknowledge that the land which we live, learn, work, and play is Treaty 8 territory, traditional lands of the Cree and Dene, and unceded territory of the Métis. For the record, we have Councillor McGrath and Councillor Grandison online with us this evening. For councillors, for voting purposes, could you leave your camera on when we're voting, please? So I can see your hand raised. And can I have someone make the motion to reconvene in public? Councillor Ball?
I move that the meeting reconvene in public.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Can I have someone second that motion? Councillor Bunjoko?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I second the motion.
Thank you. Call for a vote. All in favor? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. If anyone in attendance wishes to address council on any of the agenda items, please register now at the Legislative Services desk located to my right, as I will only call on the ones that have registered to speak. You must register prior to the start of the agenda item to which you are speaking. Registered delegations are permitted up to 5 minutes to speak and must remain on topic. We'll now hear a report from Athabasca Chippewa First Nation Municipal Services Agreement. I'd like to invite Dennis Fraser, Director, Indigenous and Rural Relations, Chris Davis, Senior Manager, Legal Services, and Janine Cruz, Manager, Indigenous and Rural Relations, to come forward to introduce the report.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. For the record, my name is Janine Cruz. I'm a manager with the Indigenous and Rural Relations Department, and to support this presentation this evening, I have with me Chris Davis, Senior Manager with Legal Services. And tonight, we are here to speak to the Athabasca Chippewa First Nation Municipal Servicing Agreement. So on March 13th, 2019, the Regional Municipality of Wood Buffalo received a request from the Athabasca Chippewa First Nation, or ACFN, to include to its previously proposed addition to reserve requests the lot at 220 Taganova Crescent in Fort McMurray, Alberta, also known and referred to as the Acton lot. Since this time, there have been ongoing discussions with both Indigenous Services Canada and ACFN to identify how the municipality can best support this request. The municipality has historically expressed support for the ACFN ATR and declared this as its official position when passing two separate resolutions authorizing the mayor to send a letter to the Minister of Crown, Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs, one on January 25th, 2018, and another on October 8th, 2019. During these previous meetings of council, administration was directed to engage with ACFN to enter into a servicing agreement and an agreement to harmonize governance, and we are excited to bring this agreement forward this evening for your consideration. If passed here this evening, this council would be the first to enter into a modern service agreement for an addition to reserve in Wood Buffalo, an outcome that would be well aligned with the values in Council's 2022-2025 strategic plan. It's therefore being recommended this evening that Council authorize the Mayor and CAO to sign the Municipal Services Agreement with the Athabasca Chippewa First Nation for the Acton lot. Supporting this recommendation is an important step forward in strengthening relationships with Indigenous partners and is an opportunity to further demonstrate our commitment to truth and reconciliation in Fort McMurray, Wood Buffalo. I thank you for your time and consideration this evening. This concludes my presentation, and we'd be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Janine. Do we have any questions from council? Councillor Stroud.
Thank you, Mayor Bowman, and through to Director Fraser. On these are the urban reserves that ACFN have been involved in. Are these the only two true urban reserves in Alberta?
Through the chair to Councillor Stroud, that is correct.
Thank you. Yeah, I just think that this is a great move forward. I visited some of the urban reserves both in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan and Kamloops, BC. It is known that the economic investment by the First Nation can often have a revitalizing effect on surrounding neighborhoods.
Excuse me, Councillor Stroud, we're not in debate yet, just questions.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, I have another question.
Go ahead.
So in reviewing the budget implications with Acton, will Acton pay for municipal services similar to other local businesses in the RMWB?
Through the chair to Councillor Stroud, I'm going to defer this question to Legal Services. Thanks.
Through the chair to Councillor Stroud, this is a very interesting and unique agreement, and that's an excellent question. We're excited to present to council this agreement is that in essence all of the typical expectations one would look to see from a lot within the urban service area are achieved, so that utility services will still be provided and paid for in the same manner that any other utility client would pay for such services. And the agreement further goes on to say that in effect, even though they're not bound by municipal taxes, as a result, they'll be paying tax in lieu for this lot. And I think the nation recognized that the unique characteristic of this lot being one-off inside an existing commercial subdivision meant that it would be best approached on an equitable basis, so that this lot's treated very much the same as any other lot in the subdivision would be treated. So in many respects, this is a continuing relationship that changes not a lot of the detail, but it does provide the First Nation with its an ability to include this in the First Nation, in the reservation, and it has tax implications for all members of the community.
Thank you, Councillor Stroud. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you. Through the chair, I know this has been in the works for some time, and I guess COVID might have been guilty for everything else, so we'll stack it up with that. The question, I guess, would be, would the land then still be under the, is there still a condo corp that runs that industrial park? Like what, other than the, I guess the raw water services that are subject to, is that still part of a condo corp, or do this transfer of land, like is it coming from Wood Buffalo Housing, via that vehicle, or what are the steps?
Through the chair, it's possible, and I don't know the whole history of the subdivision, it's possible that the developer may have been Wood Buffalo Housing and Development Corporation, but it is not governed by a condominium corporation, so there are no condo fees or other similar matters that would apply. It's a fee simple lot which will or has been already taken into reserve and will be registered in the Indian Land Registry and moved out of the Alberta Land Registry system. But other than that, nothing, I mean, driving by the lot, nothing physically or visually will change from what you would have seen previously.
Right. Now, in the wisdom, foreshadowing, knowing that we have another 4 First Nations that are very astute in business, is there any similar things that should be added this evening that would cut the work down that's already been done to get us? Because I believe this journey started some 6-7 years ago.
Through the chair to Councillor McGrath. So,
and I can see that, what was that? I'm sorry? I guess my question would be, knowing that we have another 4 First Nations in the area that have offices within the municipality, have we done a check before this evening to see if there's some way we could bundle it up? Because I've always believed in the good neighbor. If we're going to help one out, it could be a template for the others that have already offices that are set up similar to.
Through the chair to Council McGrath. So the municipality is a stakeholder in this process, and this process is a federal process through the ATR policy, reserve creation policy, that the First Nation initiates. So it would be up to them to initiate the process with Indigenous Services Canada. And our responsibility is to enter into a servicing agreement with the First Nation. So that's the jurisdiction of our responsibility within that process.
I appreciate that. So if they trigger, it'll be the same process. And through the chair, Mr. Mayor, to Chris, the legal ramifications, it doesn't mean, like, because if anybody's listening, like, we're not going to be adding on more waste trucks to take oils and stuff away. Just basically a land transfer agreement that allows the members and the First Nation members them tax benefits as we extract the resources from their land. I think that would be the major realization and the resolve of this coming forward with not a big monetary issue, but rather part of our reconciliation and helping the members out.
Through the chair to Councillor McGrath, generally you're right. It's exactly as you've characterized it. I wouldn't want to try and elaborate or reduce it. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor McGrath. Do we have any other questions of council? Not seeing any, so thank you, Chris. Thank you, Janine. Do we have any delegates for this item?
Thank you, Mayor Bowman. We do have one registered delegate for this item, Jay Telegdi with Athabasca Chippewa First Nation, who's appearing via Microsoft Teams.
Are you online there, Jay?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. If you just want to state your name for the record, Jay, and just remind you have 5 minutes to make your submission. And follow that, just remain online for questions from council, please.
Okay. Glenda, hello. Masicho, my name is Jay Telegdi. I'm here on behalf of the Athabasca Chippewa First Nation, and I'm grateful to be speaking to you today. So I'd like to start, first of all, by thanking Indigenous and Rural Relations in your legal department. Working on this MSA is something that has been going on a long time. In fact, I'd like to thank the last mayor and council as well for their work on this, and we're really grateful that it's to this stage. So I'm just going to present a little bit on why this municipal service agreement is so important for our nation. So passing the MSA is the final step before we can complete the addition to reserve process of the Act and law. And like Janine said, it's a federal process. So this is something that ACFN has actually been trying to do since 2008 with Canada, but the fight actually goes back much further. So first of all, I'll just give you some history. So ACFN received their lots from Canada, their reserve in 1960s. And at the time, many people, our members, lived out on the land. They lived at places like Jackfish or Point Bruley or Poplar Point. And as a result, that's where the reserves were placed. But when it came time for Canada to fund the building of infrastructure on reserve, as is their crown obligation, they decided not to because they thought it was too remote and it was too inaccessible. So instead, they moved the community members to Fort Chippewa and they invested the money there. And so to this day, there's no infrastructure on any of our reserves. There's no roads, there's no running water, no mail or electricity. Anything that exists there is stuff that ACFN and their members have developed themselves, whether it's beating a path or installing generators or solar panels and this sort of thing. So from Canada's perspective, this addition to reserve process is part of recognition of that fact, and it's a chance to make up for past wrongs while setting the stage for a better future. So this is where the RMWB comes in. So by accepting this MSA, you'll finally be giving ACFN a place to call their own and invest in that is in an economically feasible location. So signing this MSA will mean it'll make it easier for ACFN to continue to invest in their community-owned businesses. If you don't already know, we own 19 companies, and we're one of the largest employers in the region, not just of Indigenous people, but all people. And we're second only probably to the oil companies themselves. So this means that our members will finally get the benefit of working tax-free, which is something that other First Nations already enjoy. And this will attract more Indigenous workers to the region, not just from ACFN, but from all nations. So this would help boost the region as these workers would then have more disposable income to spend locally on goods and services. So another benefit of this is it'll provide vital employment opportunities for our members. You know, in Fort Chipewyan, there's not a lot of job opportunities. And if you're a young person just starting out your career and maybe a job at site isn't maybe well suited for your first job, working at one of our 19 companies would really fit the bill and get your career off on the right path. So the RMWB will have all these benefits. You'll have a wealthier workforce. You'll have a more populous workforce, a more diverse workforce, and all the while ACFN still paying the same municipal taxes as before, with the same bylaws in place as before, and the same zoning in effect as before. So from the RMWB's perspective, you won't even notice that it's happened. But from the ACFN and our members, it changes everything. So, you know, this will be the first true urban reserve in Alberta, and it would send a real strong message that the wealth and the opportunity of the RMWB is open to everybody, including and especially the first inhabitants of this land. So, you know, look, it's clear that RMWB is changing the past couple of years. The Indigenous representation has grown, both in elected officials, but also in inclusion of language and imagery and customs and events and locations like the crosswalks or the parks or Dene and Cree language put up in Mac Island. And so there's really great progress that is being made, but there's still more to do. And completing this MSA, this final step for us to get our additional reserve, is right in line with accomplishing the stated goals of the TRC, which the RMWB cares so much about. So once again, thank you to IRR and the legal team and to all of you. And this is a great opportunity. We're all very excited and we're counting on your support. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain. Masicho.
Thank you, Jay. Really appreciate your presentation. Do we have any questions from council? I'm not seeing any, so thank you, Jay. Appreciate it. Can I have someone make the motion? Councilor Benjoko.
Thank you, Mayor Bowman. I move that the mayor and chief administrative officer be authorized on behalf of council to sign the municipal services agreement with the Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation for 2020 Tiger Nova Crescent in Fort McMurray, AB Plan 1021463, Block 1, Lot 7A, in bracket, the acting lot.
Thank you, Councilor Benjoko. Can I have someone second that motion? Councilor Weigel.
I second that motion.
Thank you. Are there any other further questions of council for administration, followed by debate points? Not seeing any. I'll call for a vote. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Next, we have the report on responding to Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action, principles for a collaborative pathway forward in Woo Buffalo, 2022 annual update. I'd like to again invite Dennis Fraser, Director, Indigenous and Rural Relations, Janine Cruz, Manager, Indigenous and Rural Relations, and Lauren Goloski, Advisor, Reconciliation, to come forward to introduce the report.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. For the record again, my name is Janine Cruz, Manager with Indigenous and Rural Relations Department, and with me to support this presentation this evening is Lauren Goloski, Reconciliation Advisor, also with Indigenous and Rural Relations. So before I begin the presentation on the annual update on the municipal response to Truth and Reconciliation this evening, I want to acknowledge and express gratitude to artist, knowledge keeper, friend, and member of Fort McKay First Nation, Frederick McDonald. As we all know, Fred's art has transformed this council chambers into a space that is warmer, more welcoming, and reflective of the true history of the Cree, Dene, and Métis people in Fort McMurray, Wood-Buffalo. We are grateful to him for this and for giving us the permission to use his art on both our 2021 Pathways Report and this 2022 Annual Update Report being presented to you this evening. The work around Truth and Reconciliation on a national scale began in 2008 when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada traveled across the country to hear from thousands of survivors about the impacts of residential schools. After 6 years of community gatherings and thousands of testimonies, the Commission published a final report in 2015 which included 94 calls to action. These calls are actionable policy recommendations meant to aid the healing process by both acknowledging the true and horrifying history of residential schools and creating systems to prevent these abuses from ever happening again. The municipality began its work on Truth and Reconciliation in 2016 when Council directed administration to conduct a review of the TRC calls to action, identifying areas where the RMWB has a jurisdiction to implement or advance. So since this time, there have been several key moments and milestones for the municipality, from the initial discussions in 2016 to the presentation today. You'll see on the slide in front of you some of the key milestones over the past several years, and I won't go into detail, but they are there for you to review. When the Pathways Report was presented to Council in September of 2021, administration was directed to provide an annual update on the status of the municipal response to Truth and Reconciliation, with an additional report provided every 4 years to coincide with the Council term. Annual updates will continue to be provided to Council to ensure all TRC efforts are prioritized, measured, and communicated both internally and externally. While the report within your agenda packet goes into greater detail, we wanted to touch base on some of the highlights that shaped much of the work over the past year. So 2022 saw a lot of exciting items. For example, the adopting of Council's strategic plan, which is a plan that identifies rural and Indigenous communities and relationships as a value and Truth and Reconciliation as a key milestone. In January, Council also unanimously approved the Indigenous Community Capacity Grant Program, a program that looks to strengthen relationships with each nation and Métis community through the signing of protocol agreements. In Q2, we saw Council chambers transformed into a space of reconciliation with the unveiling of Indigenous artworks, which were created through a sharing circle process. This is the first time in municipal history a process like this has ever been used, and this, to us, really represents a true shift, one that places value and emphasis on traditional knowledge and Indigenous ways of knowing. We also came together in a good way on June 21st to celebrate National Indigenous Peoples Day, where over hundreds of people attended to celebrate Cree, Dene, and Métis traditions and teachings. And of course, on that day was the unveiling of the RMWB teepee, which was designed and painted by local Indigenous artist Amy Keller-Remp. In June, Council approved funding to support the work of the Murdered or Missing and Exploited Indigenous Peoples Task Force, which is a task force with the goal of fostering prevention and providing health and wellness supports for individuals and families that have been impacted by what continues to be a national crisis. In Q3, the organization launched the second annual Truth and Reconciliation Challenge, which concluded on September 30th, the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. This day was commemorated with a community gathering, a community walk, and numerous luncheons held across the region to honor survivors and their families. In Q2, Council had unanimously approved the request for funding to support the Athabasca Tribal Council's Culture Festival. This support helped ATC to deliver a 4-day event in September, and this event was and continues to be an important experience that helps to create a more culturally inclusive community. And lastly, we came together in October to support the Sisters in Spirit Day gathering, a day to honor missing or murdered and exploited Indigenous peoples and their loved ones. And this was held outside in Jubilee Plaza and attended by several of you here from RMWB Council. In addition to this overview provided, the 2022 annual update report includes the efforts made across the organization and the progress within the 29 calls to action that have been endorsed to date. The report also includes a benchmarking exercise. Until now, the RMWB didn't have the means to assess its progress with truth and reconciliation efforts, and this exercise was intended to help the organization understand how it was performing against other municipalities across the country, as well as find any additional opportunities for improvement. The benchmarking exercise is provided as an appendix within the annual report and details the results of 8 benchmarking questions, which were posed to 57 municipalities across the country. A third-party consultant conducted this research and provided a qualitative and quantitative analysis of the results for each question. The results of this exercise indicate that the RMWB's efforts to advance the TRC calls to action are exceeding the efforts of most municipalities and are exceeding all municipalities within its population cohort size. It is therefore concluded that the RMWB is a leader among Canadian municipalities with respect to the extent its reconciliation efforts are formalized, both in terms of policy and practice. That being said, our work is nowhere near complete, and there is still much to be done and many improvements to be made. When we look forward to 2023, we will continue to execute the work necessary to address the goals identified in your strategic plan. This includes undertaking a feasibility study for reconciliation spaces across the region, implementation of the local action plan of the MMEIP task force, continuing discussions and dialogue to advance protocol agreements with each nation, meaningfully commemorating important dates and events in the region, finding additional learning and development opportunities for staff, and taking the steps necessary to create an interdepartmental working group to bring further awareness and input from across the organization. It is therefore being recommended this evening that Council accept the 2022 annual update as information and formally adopt Call to Action 91. This will allow for inclusion in the 2023 annual update report and enable us to recap and highlight some of the amazing work that happened just days ago for the 2023 Arctic Winter Games. I think we would all likely agree that the work that went into this year's games set the bar for how future host societies will ensure local Indigenous peoples' territorial protocols are respected and included in all aspects of planning and participating at such events. This now concludes my report, and we'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Janine. Do we have any questions of council? Councillor Stroud.
Thank you, Mayor Bowman, and through to Janine, the presenter. Can you recall in the report, the Call to Action 64, where it recommends that IRR bring forward a motion requesting the mayor send a letter on behalf of council to the Minister of Education and to Fort McMurray school boards to advocate on increased support for Indigenous students?
Through the chair to Councillor Stroud, yes, I do.
Thank you. Do you feel Northland School should also be included in the letter?
Through the chair to Councillor Stroud, yes, I do. That was definitely a miss in our report, and we would most definitely like to include Northland School Division in that letter.
Thank you. And one more question. What would IRR consider increased support for Indigenous students?
I'm sorry, I missed that question.
That's okay. You're asking for increased support for Indigenous students in the call to action. So what would IRR consider increased support for Indigenous students?
Through the chair to Councillor Stroud, so I think increased support would look like ensuring that local Indigenous youth have the opportunity to participate in programming and events that improve their overall health and well-being. So as a municipality, we are working with the Human Resources Department to bring a local Indigenous summer student program to the organization, hoping to expose them to what municipal government is and what it can do. So that would be one piece of it. I don't know. Lauren, you wanted to add anything?
Sure. To Councillor Stroud through the chair, we also work closely with the Reconciliation Advisory Circle, and there will be opportunities to engage them to see what kind of gaps that might exist and really have that be Indigenous led. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stroud. Councillor Weigel.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the chair. Thanks for the presentation. I really appreciate it. I guess just for information, is there somewhere where the public or we could go right now to see which calls of action, what 29 calls of action we are following and what we're doing with it?
Yes, Councillor Weigel, through the chair. Currently, it is all on the rmwb.ca /TRC. We've got all the adopted calls to action listed there, as well as some history on when they were adopted over the last several years.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Weigel. Do you have any other questions from council? I'm not seeing any, so thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Janine. Do we have any other delegates to this item?
Thank you, Mayor Bowman. We have no registered delegates for this item.
Councillor McGrath?
Thank you, through the chair. I guess not a question, just I guess it would be a question. I'm sorry, I want to break the rules. Do you feel that I guess your department has the right advocacy level from a councillor's or mayor's perspective? I know that the work that you've done, all the borough relations team done over the last few years, you see some of it starting to come to fruition. So certainly appreciate where you're coming from and where you started. But is there anything more that we could be doing, I guess, to make sure that we're doing our part as elected officials?
Through the chair to Councillor McGrath, thank you for the question. I appreciate that. You know, having been with the organization for 13 years and with working with Indigenous rural communities in some capacity, I can honestly say how much we appreciate as a department the support that we have of this council and the CAO. It makes the work we do so much easier and so much more meaningful. I think an example of that was what happened here tonight with the passing of the addition to reserve. It's the first of its kind. And so the support, and I think Dennis would echo my sentiments that we appreciate you and the support that we have. And I'm sure that resonates through to the communities as well.
Okay. Well, keep up the good work there, guys. Thank you very much for the report.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Do you have any other questions from council? Councillor Benjoko?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to know if there's a process readily that will be followed to connect programs, organizers to the communities.
Through the chair to Councillor Benjoko. So just to clarify, are you asking if there's a mechanism in place to connect the programs that exist to the communities in the region? Okay, so we do work closely with the Rural Sharing Network, which is a group of partners that come together. I think there's about 20 that come together to discuss just that, what programs are available and how can we create synergies to deliver those programs to the region.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Joko. Do you have any other questions from council? Last call. Not seeing any, so, oh, yes. Thank you, Janine. Thank you, Lauren. Can I have someone make this motion? Councillor Weigel.
I move that the attached report responding to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action, Principles for Collaborative Pathway Forward in Wood Buffalo, 2022 annual update be accepted as information. And that council formally adopt call to action 91, which calls upon officials and host countries of international sporting events such as the Olympics, Pan Am, and Commonwealth Games to ensure that local Indigenous peoples' territorial protocols are respected and local Indigenous communities are engaged in all aspects of planning and participating in such events.
Thank you, Councillor Weigel. Can I have someone second that motion? Councillor Ball.
I second the motion.
Thank you. Is there any other further questions or comments or debate points from council? Not seeing any. I call for a vote. All in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for participating in this evening's meeting. Marcy Cho, Kinua Skumpton, thank you. Fun Nui.